is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
African countries declare tough containment measures as more COVID-19 cases are confirmed. Libyan rebels root for African mediation to the country's crisis. And war on Al-Shabaab, hundreds of Somalis flee U.S. airstrikes. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, the Nairobi Stock Exchange adopts remote trading to cope with coronavirus pressure. And in sports, foreign athletes fear being stranded in Kenya due to mounting coronavirus restrictions. We begin with the latest updates on the COVID-19 outbreak. There has been a dramatic increase in new cases worldwide. More than 160,000 people are now infected, and the global death toll has passed 6,000. Outside China, there are 88,000 cases spread among more than 140 countries. Italy has seen the largest outbreak in Europe, and its death toll surged by 25% on Sunday to more than 1,800. It's followed by Spain, which has seen nearly 300 deaths. Iran is the worst hit in the Middle East with around 14,000 cases, but the virus continues to slow in South Korea with just 74 new infections on Sunday. And in the Chinese mainland, 18 out of the 22 new cases were from people arriving from abroad. Only 4 new cases were confirmed in Wuhan. 80% of patients in China have now recovered. And let's take a look at how the coronavirus pandemic is unfolding in Africa. 26 countries across the continent have now reported over 350 cases so far. Liberia has recorded its first COVID-19 case, and Rwanda has confirmed 4 more cases, bringing the total number of patients there to 5. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta on Sunday confirmed that the country has 3 COVID-19 patients. The Republic of Congo has recorded just 1 case. Ethiopia has reported a total of 4. Egypt maintains the highest number of COVID-19 cases so far after confirming at least 126 cases and 2 deaths. It was earlier reported that 26 people had recovered. In South Africa, there are now 61 reported cases. That's up from 38. Meanwhile, Algeria has 48 infections and reported the 3rd death from the disease. Senegal has reported 3 new cases on Saturday, bringing its total to 24. In Côte d'Ivoire, 3 new cases have been detected, bringing the total there to 4. Morocco has applied strict border restrictions in response to COVID-19. It has 28 cases and 1 recorded death. Nigerian health officials say a COVID-19 patient has tested negative. Equatorial Guinea has reported its first case. Namibia has confirmed 2 infections. Well, as mentioned, South Africa has now confirmed over 60 cases of COVID-19, and President Cyril Ramaphosa has declared a state of disaster. For more on this, we're now joined by CGTN's Angelo Coppola, standing by for us in Johannesburg. Angelo, of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa addressed the nation on Sunday evening concerning the growing COVID-19 cases, and that's been followed by a meeting with the cabinet ministers, or rather a press conference with the cabinet ministers on Monday, and that's them there giving more details from the president's announcement. Tell us a little bit more about Monday's briefing.
Well, the briefing, in fact, is going on as we speak right now. There are approximately 9 ministers in the room talking to around 70 to 80 journalists from across the world and talking about the details, sort of filling in the gaps after Ramaphosa's conversation with the nation yesterday or last night. First, most important thing, schools are going to be closing across the country from Wednesday. This is good news for some of the scholars, they think, but that's to isolate and make sure that the virus doesn't spread through the school communities and then move into other areas. We believe that the shops, mines and manufacturing sector are going to stay operational for now. They have been asked to heighten their hygiene processes to make sure that their workers stay clear. In terms of borders, we understand that several borders will be closed, specifically those between South Africa and Botswana, Lesotho and Mozambique. The Zimbabwean border post, there's only one going into that country, will in fact remain open. There will be more staff brought in from those closed borders that will go and assist with what's happening in Zimbabwe. No foreigners, of course, will be allowed into South Africa. All visas are cancelled, and that's for foreigners traveling from high-risk countries, countries like Italy, Iran, and to a less extent China, of course, was also mentioned. South Africans are allowed to come back home, obviously. They will be asked to test and then to self-isolate if they've come from those high-risk countries. All international travel for government officials is cancelled, and all local domestic travel for government officials is also discouraged, as we understood it yesterday and this morning. In terms of the government, they've also indicated that all activities, religious, social, sport, which feature more than 100 people, have also been banned for the foreseeable future. That affects the religious environment with a big meeting that's happening up in Polokwane in a couple of weeks' time. And of course, there's the question then of what's happening on the workplace front in terms of companies that have open plan offices with more than 100 people working in those open plan offices. And there was also talk mentioned about how that will be dealt with. That hasn't been dealt with just yet.
And Angela, of course, as you're speaking now, these are very stringent measures announced by the president. Has there been any discussion of how they're going to be applied or how they'll guarantee compliance with these new stringent measures? Also, just a brief word, perhaps, Angela, on what it means that the president declared a state of national disaster.
Well, in terms of the act that governs this declaration that was made by the president yesterday, it gives the government a range of powers and authorities that they can implement certain possibly constitutionally sensitive areas or issues. The right to assembly is being raised. There's also, obviously, as I said, people moving around, general movement that's also been kind of underwritten by the Constitution. There are regulations underway, they've almost been finalized, we understand from the briefing this morning, that will be presented and signed off within the next couple of hours. We've in fact heard within the next 3 hours or so, those new regulations which give the government and this command council authority to act on behalf of the country and its well-being have been created and established. There may be some constitutional challenges. We don't know just yet. We'll have to see how that plays out. But in terms of the schools, that's critical, as I said earlier, and we'll see how that moves going forward. Then there's also the question around the universities. They've also been told to close indefinitely. There is consultation that's happening between government and the social partners. There's a meeting planned for 2 o'clock local time to figure out how to deal with short work weeks, what's happening in the mining sector, because we understand the mining sector, the manufacturing sector will remain open, but there will be heightened hygiene issues put in place there. In terms of the hospitals, we understand that the state, military and private hospitals will also get involved. There the government will authorize permission. And then perhaps the most important thing is around the funding. Tito Mboweni, Finance Minister, was saying there's no question that money will be found where it's needed. There is some money, or a fair amount of money, in the National Disaster Fund, but he wouldn't disclose what it was, jokingly, half-jokingly, saying that he doesn't want to give anybody any ideas about what they can charge for items going forward. The DTI Minister, on the other hand, also said that they're looking at supply chain disruption, trying to find ways to bring in necessary items that are needed to fight this coronavirus that's spreading through the country. And interestingly enough, in the first 10 days, this virus has mutated or multiplied twice every 2 days. So every 2 days it's doubled in number of people that are infected. So this is what prompted the government and the president to call for that national disaster state that he announced on Sunday night.
Thank you so much. Angela Coppola joining us there live from Johannesburg on the latest measures announced in South Africa to fight COVID-19. Let's turn to Nigeria now. Nigeria has in fact shown a strong level of preparedness to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. That's Here's what's coming up. Libyan rebels root for African mediation to the country's crisis. And the war on Al-Shabaab, hundreds of Somalis flee US airstrikes.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
The spokesperson for the Libyan National Army, Ahmed al-Masmari, says they favor African mediation in the Libyan crisis. This comes as the UN looks into appointing a new head to its support mission in Libya following Ghassan Salameh's resignation. CGTN's Adel Al-Makhroui has more.
Following the resignation of the UN envoy to Libya, Ghassan Salameh, all negotiation tracks in Libya are temporarily suspended. And while the UN is looking for Salameh's replacement, the spokesperson of Libya's LNA forces, Ahmed al-Masmari, says it's probably best to empower an African mediator.
We've tried having envoys from Europe, the US, and even Arabs. I believe the best solution for African conflicts always comes from African leaders and African envoys. We Arab and Africans have specific cultures, and those who fail to understand it won't bring results.
Currently, US politician Stephanie Williams will be leading the negotiation efforts. She doesn't seem to have fans among the Eastern Libyan bloc. Nonetheless, al-Masmari insists they are committed to reaching a conditional political solution.
Tripoli is the center where international interests in Libya intersect. Therefore, we have to move on both political and military approaches. I believe we are doing good on both tracks. If our conditions are met, we won't resort to fighting. Tripoli will be safe by applying these conditions.
The LNA wants to monopolize the arms acquisition in Libya, and it is demanding the militias to hand over their weapons and self-dissolve. It's almost impossible for the militias supporting the government of National Accord to accept these terms. There is no trust between Libyan factions, and that diminishes the possibility of success for any political dialogue and makes both sides rely more on armed confrontations. Adel Al-Makhroui, CGTN, Cairo.
To Somalia now, where US airstrikes targeting al-Qaeda-linked insurgents have displaced hundreds. It's estimated that at least 480 people from around 40 families have fled the lower Shabelle region in just the past few weeks. Tuesday's airstrike near Janale town that left at least 6 civilians dead has raised questions over the impact of the US campaign against Islamist militants in the Horn of Africa nation. Meanwhile, let's go to South Africa now, where a new groundwater citizen science project was launched in Cape Town. The project aims to better understand the long-term impact that the recent drought has had on underground aquifers. The initiative will see residents with boreholes on their properties work alongside expert hydrologists to gauge the long-term sustainability of groundwater use. CGTN's Travis Andrews found this report.
The worst of Cape Town's drought may be over, but during its height, the dams were close to running dry, and many residents switched to alternate water sources. That includes tapping into underground aquifers using boreholes. But just what has the impact been, given the hundreds of drilling sites across the city? That's what the Groundwater Citizen Science Project aims to answer, in order to check the long-term sustainability of this important water source.
This project, what we are looking at is the cumulative impacts of groundwater use in 2 areas. The Newlands area, where there's a lot of residential use, and also in the Epping industrial area, also the airport area, which overlies the Cape Flats aquifer, a significant aquifer in the Western Cape, where there's a lot of industrial water use. And what we're wanting to see is what are the impacts of this groundwater usage on your water table on the aquifer.
Residential homes where borehole sites have been installed will be the primary locations for monitoring the aquifers, which will be critically important should the next drought occur. Initial assessments point to a resilient groundwater network that was revitalized by a good run of rains over the last 12 months.
In the local area, the Cape Flats aquifer, we saw about a 5 to 10 meter drop in your water table. But what we've also seen in the last couple of years is that it's coming up again. And that's the value of groundwater monitoring.
But the aquifers are not just important for drought mitigation, they're also critically important for agricultural irrigation, especially in the Philippi horticultural zone, which is considered one of the city's breadbaskets. Most experts believe that global warming is becoming an ever-present threat, and that could lead to a higher occurrence of droughts here in the Western Cape. It's a worst-case scenario that will almost certainly mean groundwater reserves will have to be used once again to stave off a total collapse of the water resources. But public involvement could make the city much more resilient.
The end goals, we would really like to get citizens involved because they are to a large degree the groundwater users through their private boreholes. We would really like to get them on board to also be part of the monitoring network, to be responsible groundwater users and to ensure that we use our groundwater resources sustainably.
Groundwater then is a shared and hidden resource which has been built up over thousands of years and should be considered a natural treasure with which the city simply cannot do without. Ravs Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
It's been over a year since Cyclone Idai swept through Mozambique and neighboring countries, killing hundreds and displacing tens of thousands. CGTN's Robert Nagila returned to Beira to find out how its residents are rebuilding their lives.
1 year after Cyclone Idai swept through the port city of Beira, Amelia Mateus, who lives in the low-income neighborhood of Nyara Maraja, recalls the events of that day vividly.
It was horrifying. Our roof was blown away and a tree fell through the house.
The roof is back on, but the house is falling apart. Cyclone Idai may be gone, but its impact is still being felt.
Last year was difficult. We do not have the money to start over.
For much of this country, the effects of Cyclone Idai are still very visible. And it's clear 1 year later, its people are still struggling to rebuild their lives. At least 602 people were killed by Idai. More than 2.5 million people, half of them children, are still in need of humanitarian assistance. About 93,000 people have not been able to return to their homes. Amelia's next-door neighbor, Nilza Manajo, a mother of 3, is just thankful her family is alive.
I don't want to remember that day. We are still terrified.
Her husband, who depends on odd jobs for income, has carried out makeshift repairs on their damaged roof. That was a year ago. Their neighborhood now has access to clean water, thanks to a local non-governmental organization. Despite their challenges, these people count themselves lucky. Many of their countrymen are still dependent on humanitarian assistance for food and shelter. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Beira, Mozambique.
Meanwhile, Kenya could be on the verge of a food crisis if the locust invasion is not brought under control. The Food and Agriculture Organization says in a few weeks' time, the next generation of locusts will begin to hatch. This is expected to happen as crops begin to sprout, further worsening an already dire situation. CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar has more.
East Africa has witnessed the worst desert locust outbreak in decades. Kenya in particular is staring at a food crisis due to a renewed invasion by the destructive pests. Mature swarms are laying eggs across the country, many of which are already hatching. Volunteers from the National Youth Service have teamed up with county governments to combat the locusts.
I have to brief them on how to use the chemical. You have to keep on reminding the use of the chemical, the balance of the chemical and mixing ratio. You have to remind them on how to use the protective gear because if you don't use the protective gear, it might be harmful to you. If you do wrong, any slight wrong mistake, it can bring back bad effect on your body and your health.
One such volunteer is Derek Mwangi, who joined the National Youth Service last year. This will be his 5th time participating in the locust control program.
I love doing this because it's helping my community. The challenge here, it's only the temperature. The temperatures here are too high.
With the next generation of locusts projected to hatch in a few weeks, the impact of the infestation could be devastating. The locusts have devoured huge amounts of pasture, posing a threat to the food security of livestock and local communities.
If they're not taken rid of, it will affect the pasture. Most of them are pastoralists, and we had many communities, different communities within the area. And the most problem that it might cause, because of conflict of the scarce pasture caused by the locust, it might cause, that is, tribal conflicts.
According to the Kenyan government, the locusts have invaded 26 counties. The government says it has trained 500 NYS officers to help combat the pests. But despite all these efforts, farmers are worried that the newly hatched hoppers will reverse the gains in the fight against the invasion so far. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
And coming up in your business news, up next. The Nairobi Stock Exchange adopts remote trading to cope with coronavirus pressure. And UK airlines plead for a bailout to stay in business after the US travel ban.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Nairobi Securities Exchange has launched a platform that allows trading amid the worldwide panic surrounding the coronavirus pandemic. Traders will now have access to the bourse from a remote location or their homes with the help of the NSE's automated trading system. The access will only be possible through designated computers that can be accessed through a secure remote connection. Currently, access to the automated trading platform is restricted to a specific pre-configured user IP address within the broker network. As a result, it is not technically viable to access it directly without using a stockbroker network. Experts have warned of a potential effect on liquidity, volumes and prices due to the adaptation of remote trading. France has appealed to airlines to help bring back thousands of French citizens stuck in Morocco. This is after the North African country suspended all international passenger flights due to the coronavirus. The French consul in Morocco, Philippe Cazenave, said on Twitter that France would not carry out its own repatriation as long as there was an option to fly on commercial airlines. Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said on Twitter that there would be 40 flights from Morocco to France on Sunday, with more to follow in the coming days. He added that other flights will be sent to Agadir and Tangier to repatriate some 12,000 French nationals from Morocco. This comes after the North African country announced a rise in coronavirus cases from 18 to 28 on Sunday. The Tunisian government has announced that traders will not be restricted from trading with China amid the coronavirus pandemic. Tunisian businessmen will, however, continue to be subject to the preventative measures to enforce at the transit zones. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi reports.
The Minister of Trade said that some Tunisian companies have reported a drop in the supply of raw materials and products from many European, Asian and North American countries due to the spread of the coronavirus epidemic. However, maritime trade with China will not be suspended, but will rather be reinforced.
There is a technical and health control on all imported goods from China and other destinations. The pace is slow, but we do not fear anything. Trade will go on as usual to supply the market.
The Tunisian parliament stressed that negotiations continue with China for financing and realizing several mega projects across Tunisia.
We trust our Chinese friends for the new metro in Naboul city, the business city in Sfax, the administrative city in Tunis, as well as the deepwater port and logistical zone in Nefida. China has the technical skills and financial resources. Tunisia is confident that the current global health crisis will be overcome as soon as possible.
Experts are confident that China can overcome the current situation and increase production at factories and industrial zones.
Thousands of Tunisian enterprises depend on the trade with China. The economic situation in China affects our businesses directly. China has enough expertise to face coronavirus and to resume production with more efficiency.
Tunisian economists say the regression of the pace of commercial traffic at ports and airports is normal. This phenomenon has led to a disruption in the import of raw materials, given the spread of COVID-19 globally. The Confederation of Industry, Trade and Handicrafts and Chambers of Commerce across Tunisia are relieved because local businesses who are reliant on Chinese supplies like spare parts, electronics and mobile phones are getting back to normal. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
South African mobile operator Telkom has announced plans to cut its staff by up to 20%, costing an estimated $92.5 million. The cuts include voluntary redundancies as part of restructuring efforts aimed at tackling the decline in its fixed voice and data services. Phase 1 of the job cuts is underway and is expected to affect employees from January to April. An estimated 1,585 workers have applied for the voluntary severance and early retirement packages. The exercise will have a negative impact on its 2020 financial year. Telkom's earnings dropped by 4.3% to $303.8 million. Following the announcement, shares in the mobile operator plunged to a 7-year low, trading 16.93% weaker at $1.18. UK airlines are calling for an immediate $9.3 billion emergency bailout to mitigate potential effects of the coronavirus pandemic on the sector. The airlines have requested a credit facility to be made available, with the proposed emergency funding to be paid once normal operations resume. It also proposes that the government should consider taking a financial stake in airlines and airports to ensure their survival. With the international travel industry currently facing a widespread shutdown, a vast majority of airlines have suspended travel operations until further notice. Following the extension of a Europe travel ban by the US, several airlines could cut jobs and ground an unprecedented number of planes. Well, the US Federal Reserve has cut its benchmark interest rates to near zero to help shore up the economy amid the pandemic. It is the first emergency cut since the 2008 financial crisis. Toby Muse has more from Washington.
In a clear sign that the US is worried over a potential coronavirus-inspired recession, the Federal Reserve cut its rate Sunday to close to zero.
And I want to congratulate the Federal Reserve. For starters, they've lowered the Fed rate from what it was, which was 1 to 1.25, and it's been lowered down to 0 to 0.25.
In the same press conference, President Donald Trump also urged people not to panic buy groceries. He said he spoke with the CEOs of the major grocery stores in the United States who said there will be enough provisions. Now, this comes as parts of the government are urging people to do more. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, said that a 2-week nationwide shutdown would, in his opinion, not be an overreaction.
I would like to see a dramatic diminution of the personal interaction that we see in restaurants and in bars. Whatever it takes to do that, that's what I'd like to see. Americans should be prepared that they're going to have to hunker down significantly more than we as a country are doing.
Some of the largest private businesses, such as Apple and Patagonia, announced a temporary shuttering of their stores across the country, not to be reopened at the earliest until the end of March. A number of states, such as Illinois and Ohio, ordered restaurants and bars to shut down in an effort to help stop the spread of the virus. The chair of New York City Council's Health Committee, Mark Levine, tweeted, "In places like New York City, the healthcare system is about to be entirely overrun. It will be the equivalent of wartime." Here in Washington, D.C., people bought provisions for the coming weeks.
Basically, we're doing social distancing and we're stocking up on the kind of basics that we might need in case we can't get out of the house.
And how long would you say you're prepared for? Like, have you got that in mind, 2 weeks, a week?
I think that we're prepared for several weeks at this point.
I'm scared. We have a kid right now. I'm scared what's going on in the next. We don't know. And we just like preparing meat, some kind of like that. Paper towels, just everything like that. I already did it. And especially like sanitize, be preparing for the next few weeks.
What's clear is that the country is now preparing for what could be some very unpleasant weeks ahead. Toby Muse, CGTN, Washington.
Let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. A South African exhibition seeks to promote contemporary African art.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We go to South Africa now. On the Cusp is an exhibition showcasing talented multimedia artists from across the African continent. The exhibition is part of the Stellenbosch Triennale. Yolisa Njamela has more.
On the Cusp takes into account future possibilities by engaging with new artists who are set to innovate in the African scene to come, as well as on the world stage. Emerging artists hardly get an opportunity to showcase their works, especially in the context of a triennale. A triennale is instituted every 3 years. The Stellenbosch Triennale is a non-commercial, multidisciplinary art platform hosting a range of artists from Africa and the diaspora.
The whole idea has been about sustainability, how we grow new practices from the larger curators exhibition. And so we wanted to know how can we introduce younger artists into the Triennale. It's a great opportunity for them because this is expected to be just at the launch of their artistic careers. And so the idea that younger emerging practices to be included in the Triennale is very important for us. It has been the working strategy from the very beginning of the Stellenbosch Triennale.
The theme of this exhibition is quite deliberate. It's called Tomorrow There Will Be More of Us. Through art and special interventions, the artists are responding to this theme. The curator says some of them are not necessarily directly responding. They are actually critiquing the theme.
The idea that there will be more of us is not necessarily a humanist or humanistic thought. We are thinking of us, the more of us being a multiplicity of selves, a multiplicity of bodies, but also a complexity of bodies. So, I mean, now human beings have become so much entwined with technology that For myself, I can give myself as an example. I do not remember numbers anymore because I trust my mobile phone, my smartphone to do that. And so tomorrow there'll be more beings, there'll be complex, there'll be an expanded concept of what a human being can be. And this is really what we are looking out for with this exhibition.
It is also looking at the present and seeing what the creative promises to deliver to the future through their imagination and innovation.
This exhibition especially, and also together with the curators exhibition, looks across the entirety of Africa as a geographical location. So the artists in this exhibition are coming from Uganda, we have South Africa, 2 representatives from South Africa, we have Tanzania, we have Kenya, there's Angola, Zambia, and then we have Ghana. And then Nigeria, so there's a lot of African countries represented in this exhibition.
Art enthusiasts have an opportunity to immerse themselves in this art world up to the end of April. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Cape Town, South Africa.
Coming up in sports. Foreign athletes fear being stranded in Kenya after coronavirus cases increase in the country.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.